On July 17th, 1970, 5 convicts escaped Dorchester Penitentiary in New Brunswick, Canada. They were John Lee Parker, 27 Jack Fisher, 32 Sam Wetmore, 36 George Hannington, 29 and Lemuel Fleming, 41. They stumbled upon an abandoned farm 20 kilometers away. 2 days later, 2 of the convicts told the war what happened to them at the farm. This is a story as told by one of the convicts, John Lee Parker. We had been planning our escape for months. We wanted to go to America, where no one would know who we are. We had to get as far away as possible. We escaped at night. Once we got past the walls, we ran north and planned to turn west past the Memramcook River. We ran for a while, then saw a farm. We were tired, hungry, and thirsty, so we decided to take a break. The farm looked old and decaying. The house was dirty and overgrown. The barn was falling apart. We weren't sure if anyone lived there, so we approached slowly. We split into 2 groups, 3 to the back door and 2 to the front. If anyone was home, our plan was to tie them up so we could get something to eat and drink. I went to the back door with 2 other boys and waited to see if anyone came out. A few minutes later, the door opened and it was Jack. He said there was no one in the house, so we went inside to look for food and drink. The inside of the house was dirty and smelly. We looked for food but only found cans of meat and beans. The faucet didn't work, so Jack went outside to find a well. We heard Sam yelling. "Get out here now!" We heard Samuel again. He was in the barn. We ran towards the barn. The barn doors were slightly open. We paused for a moment, looking at each other. I was the first one inside. The barn was dark. I could see Sam in front of me. I noticed a man a few meters away from Sam. He was staring at me. He had long silver hair and looked about 60. The other boys stopped when they saw him. We stood there looking at him. Jack asked who the man was and if he lived there. The man didn't answer. Jack was angry. I knew if he didn't answer soon it could spell trouble for the man. Another minute went by before the old man slowly turned. His head was now looking at Jack. He responded in a calm, confident voice. "I live here. I've lived here a long time." I noticed the old man had a slight accent. Jack then said, "Sam, grab that chair and find some rope." They both knew Jack's temper, so they grabbed a chair and found some baling twine. The old man sat in the chair. He didn't fight back or say anything. He just stared at Jack with an expressionless look on his face. I thought something was not right about this man. My father murdered my mother when I was 14. He was a fiend to me and my siblings, so spotting evil had become second nature to me. I kept my thoughts to myself. Showing weakness in front of the boys was not something I was going to do. Jack told Sam to get the canned food and asked if he'd found a well. Sam said he had. Jack turned to the old man and asked about his life in this hellhole. The old man didn't respond at first, just glared at Jack. When he finally spoke, he said, "Let me tell you a story. I was born a long time ago in France. When I was young, something terrible happened to me. I can't die because I don't fear death. Each day I'm forced to stay on this earth. I can see you're a retired gentleman. I don't care what your business is. I only ask you to leave before nightfall." Sam walked in with the food and water. We ate in a light area of the barn. We shared food. The other boys talked about their plans for America. I felt unsafe with this old man. Jack said someone needed to go to the loft. The area was unsafe. We traveled by night to avoid being spotted. We crossed several rivers and went upstream before going back on land. It should take the dogs a while to find our scent. George said he'd take the first watch. The rest of us went to different parts of the barn to get comfortable and sleep. I was awakened by Lemuel shaking me. It was my turn to watch, so I went to the ladder to the loft. The old man was glaring at me again. He didn't seem worried that 5 escaped convicts had tied him to a chair. When I got to the loft and looked outside, I saw. It was getting late, so we'd be leaving soon. I wondered what Jack had planned for the old man. I sat down on a barrel and fell asleep. When I woke up, it was almost dusk. I hurried down the ladder to see if the boys were I was still asleep. If they hadn't woken me up, they'd have done it by now. As I got down off the ladder and looked in the old man's direction, I saw he was gone. I ran over to the chair to check. The belly and twine we'd used to tie him up was ripped to shreds lying on the ground. I yelled to the boys to wake up and come quick. They came running over to my side and were as unnerved as I was. Sam and George had tied him up well, and he didn't look strong enough to rip through the twine. The barn was getting dark, so I asked Jack what to do. We heard a noise from one of the rooms in the back of the barn. Lemuel said, "Let's get out of here, we need to leave." "I'm not leaving without saying goodbye. He knows we're escaped convicts. That's him in one of those rooms. If you're too scared to go back, wait here." "I'm going with you." Jack started walking to the back of the barn. There were at least 3 rooms, stables. Jack was a tough guy on the outside, but I thought he was a coward. Then he was cut off. We ran to the barn doors, but they wouldn't open. We found out why someone had put a chain through the doors with a padlock on it, locking us in. "We need to get out of here. Let's find a way through the barn wall." I heard a growl and something running towards us. Sam screamed and said, "Help, it got me." He screamed, then stopped. Lemuel yelled, "Let's get out of here." I ran from Sam's screams. In the dark barn, I ran into things. When I came to the back, I stood there. I stood there to catch my breath. It was silent. Nothing was moving. It was as if the world had come to a halt. A few minutes went by when I heard someone whisper, "Johnny, is that you?" "It's me, Jack. I think I found a way out of here. Come here." I immediately stiffened up and froze. I thought to myself, I heard Jack scream something awful. Could he still be alive then again? I heard someone whispering from the dark, "Come on, Johnny. Get over here." I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to wait to be next. I slowly went towards the sound of Jack's voice. Lemuel was screaming from the loft. I went faster. I stumbled and fell. I heard a grunting sound. I jumped back. "Johnny? It's me, Jack. Help me up." I reached down to help Jack. I touched something warm on the ground. It was blood. I smelled it. I found Jack's arm and helped him up. I saw the moonlight and the way out. Jack was hurt badly and bleeding. We hurried to the hole. I pushed on the barn's paneling and it opened. We went outside and started heading back. I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. We walked all night to get away from the farm. When it got light enough, we found a busy road to get help. People figured out we were picked up by the police. I thought Jack was going to die during the night, but he held on. After John Lee Parker told his story to the warden let the local police know. They went to investigate the farm. When they went inside the barn, several of the men said it smelled like an animal's den. They found the old man on the loft sitting in a chair reading a book. He was arrested for the murders of Sam Wetmore, George Hannington, and Lemuel Fleming. They found a hidden room under one of the rooms in the barn. It contained the bones of several dozen people, including Sam and Lemuel. The bones were picked clean, except for some fresh tissue. Over the next month, they searched the entire premises. Many bodies were found on the farm, but they think there may have been as many as 100. George's body was never found. They searched the house and found old items from the 1700s. An old photograph matching the old man was found. Experts say the photograph is from the 1850s and was taken in France. No one knows how or when the old man came to live on the farm. The old man was sentenced to prison and stayed there until 1984. One day in the summer of 1984, he vanished. It's thought he escaped. A search was organized, but he was never found. Another family who purchased the land said over the years that they've seen a strange older man walking around the farm and sometimes just standing there. The old man never gave his name to the authorities. His nickname became the Old Man. The warden asked the old man if John Lee Parker's story was true. The old man said it was. Jack survived his injuries but needed to have his left arm amputated. His story matched John's. The warden asked John what killed the other men. John said a werewolf. On August 15th, 1997, Peter Brooks and his girlfriend Karen Hall went to the Eagle Cap Wilderness to spend a quiet weekend. Karen never made it back. 15 years later, Peter finally told the police what happened. It was supposed to be one of the best days of my life. I was going to ask Karen to marry me. It was something that will haunt me forever. Karen and I had been dating for 3 years. We both knew we wanted to spend the rest of our lives together. The only thing that was missing was that I hadn't asked her to marry me yet. She'd been pushing me to ask her for a while, but she didn't know why I hadn't. I'd been saving up for a year to buy her a wedding ring. She loved jewelry and talked about pink diamonds and dolphins, so I wanted to buy her a custom-made ring with dolphins and a big pink diamond. After a year of saving and being frugal, I went to our local jeweler and ordered her a custom-made ring. I was sure she would love it. After several weeks, the ring was finished. I decided to do something special for her when I popped a question and showed her the ring. They loved camping in the summer. It was August, so I planned a weekend getaway. We liked camping in the mountains of the Eagle Cap National Forest. It's famous for being out in the middle of nowhere. We liked being alone with just us in nature. We'd camped in Eagle Cap many times. We went to Eagle Cap National Forest, which was huge. We wanted to see as much of it as possible. We were adventurous and loved discovering new places. When Friday afternoon came, we loaded up our camping gear and set off for a weekend retreat. A special surprise awaited us. As we drove along the paved mountain road into Eagle Cap, I asked her which she thought for a moment and then said, "Do you remember that fork in the road? Let's take the left out, sure thing. Bet there are some cool spots to camp there." After a minute, I ignored it and kept driving. What could it be? Foreign. I was nervous about proposing to her since I'd never done it before. We drove for more hours, ate snacks, and chatted about work and family. When we reached the fork and saw the sign for Ice Lake, I turned left. A little voice inside said, "No, don't go this way. Turn around." I felt a chill and shook like I'd been cold. Karen looked at me and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine, but I didn't know why I'd shivered. Once we hit the road on the left fork, it turned into a bumpy dirt road. This road wasn't well maintained. It was bumpy. Ron said, "Wow, maybe I shouldn't have picked this place." I didn't say anything. I just laughed a little. I didn't want to tell her about the bad feeling I'd gotten. I wanted this weekend to be perfect. I wanted the atmosphere to be happy. After another hour, the road ended. I stopped the car. "That's it. We can set up camp anywhere. There are dead trees and branches for a fire," she smiled. "Great. I'm glad we don't have to drive anymore." I smiled and said, "I hear that." As I shut off the car, I noticed how dark it was. The forest was thick with pine trees. There wasn't going to be a moon until the next day. This meant it was pitch black. It was like this a lot when we camped, but tonight it felt eerie. I turned my thoughts back to Karen and the task at hand. I got my flashlight from the console, turned it on, and said, "Let's set up and cook. I'm hungry." "I'm hungry too." I don't like setting up in the dark, but there's nothing we can do. It was August, so I expected it to be cold. I heard a roaring river and knew that was why it was colder than usual. I made my way to the back of the car and started unloading our camping gear. I think we should set up the tent first, then make a fire and cook dinner. The tent was easy to set up. We put our sleeping bags and mats inside. Then we gathered firewood for the fire. We cooked our dinner over an open fire. It made us feel like we were going back to our roots. Our ancestors used to cook over an open fire. This was probably another reason we liked camping. Camping helped us tap into our primal instincts. In the city, life can get lost in technology. Camping kept us grounded and at peace. We gathered firewood to build a huge fire. Normally, we have to scavenge for wood because other campers use it up. This place was different. It was as if no one else had ever camped here before. At first, I thought, wow, I won't have to search far for wood, but then I got an eerie feeling that maybe there was a reason no one camped here. Maybe it was just the nasty road we drove on to get here. I kept gathering wood for the fire, but it didn't help much. Once we finished gathering as much wood as we could each carry, we built a fire in a fire pit made of big rocks. It was cold, so the fire was welcome. It made us feel secure. There's something about a fire that makes us feel safe. Maybe it keeps dangerous animals away. Whatever the reason, it's nice. As the fire died down, I said to Karen, "Let's start cooking, I was hungry." "Yeah, me too," she replied. "Let's get it going." I walked back to the car, about 40 yards from the fire and our tent. I heard a clicking noise in the trees. It sounded like it was moving. It was a wet clicking sound. Click, click, click. It suddenly stopped. Something was moving through the trees. It seemed to be moving away from me as I walked closer to the car. I froze, thinking, what is that? I looked back at Karen, who was getting warm by the fire. She hadn't heard me. The fire was crackling, so I stood there for several minutes, unable to move. Before Karen said, "Are you okay? What's taking so long?" "Nothing. I'm just trying to find everything." I didn't want to alarm her and ruin the mood of what was supposed to be an unforgettable weekend. We bought steaks from the market in town. We always bring meat for dinner and eggs and bacon for breakfast. We love feeling primal and returning to our roots, if only for a few days a couple times a month. I took the steaks out of their packaging and put them on the grill. They started sizzling as the fire seared the outside. I reached into the bag with the cooking supplies. I grabbed the seasoning and sprinkled it over our steaks. The smell of sizzling steaks filled the air. I love the smell of steaks cooking over an open fire. Karen leaned in and took a good whiff. "Oh, those sure smell good," she said. I'd also brought some potatoes and peppers, so I sliced them up and threw them on the grill. I'd heard earlier, but it escaped my mind. I was relaxed for the first time since we'd hit the left fork of the road. While I was cooking, Karen went back to the car to grab our camping chairs. We sat and watched the food cook over the fire. We were happy to be together. Once the steaks and vegetables finished cooking, we pulled them off the grill. We talked and laughed as we ate our delicious dinner again. My mind was happy. Karen got a bottle of wine in glasses. We like drinking red wine when we eat red meat. We clinked glasses and said cheers. This weekend was to propose to her. I'd been keeping the ring in my pocket since we left. I wasn't sure how she didn't notice it. Also, the fear and excitement of proposing hit me. I started panicking. "What's wrong?" "You've been acting squirrely ever since we arrived. It gives me the creeps." My mind went back to proposing. I started telling myself maybe it would be better to propose tomorrow. There was no rush. I finished drinking the last of the wine from my glass. I handed her the glass and asked, "May I have some more?" We drank and talked for another hour. My head was spinning, so I decided to go to bed. I looked over at Karen, who was passed out in her chair. I helped her out of the chair, and we went to bed. I stumbled over to the tent, opened the door, and went inside. Karen laughed as she flopped down on the floor. I started laughing too as I fumbled my way inside. Once I was inside, I zipped up the tent and unrolled the sleeping bags. I helped Karen get inside her bag and put her head on her pillow. I turned to climb into my bag, and I could hear Karen snoring. I whispered to myself with a chuckle. She never handled alcohol well. One glass puts her to sleep. Now it was my turn. My head hit the pillow, and I was out like a light. I started navigating my way through the dreamland of my mind. You can't explain it. You have to see it. I woke up to the sun hitting the tent and sweat rolling down my forehead. My head was pounding. Red wine always gave me a bad hangover. Karen was still asleep next to me. I laid there for a long time, my head throbbing in pain. She rolled over and slowly started to wake up. She looked up at me and said, "You've been awake long." "Not long," I replied, "but my head hurts." "Why do you drink red wine?" she asked. "Because I like it," I said, massaging my temples. "Let's get up and eat something," she suggested. "It'll help your hangover," she said. Good idea. I feel like my head is going to explode. We got up and out of the tent. It was warm, so we didn't stay in our sleeping bags. Hangovers are awful. Every time I get one, I promise myself I'm never going to drink again. After breakfast, we explored the area. It was new to us. As the day went on, Karen's attitude changed. She became distant. I tried to figure out what I did wrong. I couldn't. I thought maybe it was just a woman thing. Maybe it was because I hadn't proposed yet. I ran every scenario through my head, but I came up with nothing. As the evening started to settle in, she was quiet and cold to me. I stopped asking her questions and went about cooking dinner. I tried to act like nothing was wrong, even though something was wrong with her. As we were sitting there by the fire, she suddenly got up and walked straight to the eye, unzipped the tent, and went inside. I thought, what's wrong with her? I sat in the chair for a few minutes and thought, I might as well go to bed. My brain was tired from thinking about her. I thought a good night's sleep would help. I went to the tent and saw she was in her sleeping bag. I didn't say I climbed into the tent, zipped it up, and got into my sleeping bag. I turned away from her and fell asleep. I woke up to the sound of clicks. I immediately sat up in a panic. I looked over at Karen and saw her empty, half-open sleeping bag. I looked over at the tent door and saw that it was still zipped up. How did she unzip the tent and zip it up without me hearing? I'm a light sleeper, and I didn't drink tonight, so I shouldn't have been in that deep of a sleep. I heard the clicking again, this time with a loud wet sound. My heart started to race, and I felt a surge of fear and adrenaline. I thought maybe she was just going to the bathroom. Why would she zip the tent back up? We always leave it unzipped. We know we'll be quick, and it's a pain to zip it up and unzip it again. I wasn't sure how long I sat there. I sat there trying to decide what to do. It felt like forever. After a few minutes, I decided to lie back down on my sleeping bag and wait to see what happened. I dozed off and woke up to my name being screamed over and over. "Peter, Peter, Peter, Karen, is that you? Get out of here. They're watching you. They're coming for you. Get out of here now," she said. I immediately jumped up, unzipped the tent, and ran straight for the car. As I was running, I could see Karen in the trees, but it was hard to make her out. I could also hear things moving swiftly through the trees and a wet clicking sound. It grew louder and louder as the things in the trees got closer. As I was within a few feet of the car, I remembered the car keys were on the dashboard, which is where we usually leave them. When we go camping, I don't lose them. I opened the car door and jumped into the front seat. I quickly tried to lock it, but kept missing the button. I was scared. After several attempts, I found the button. As all the locks clicked, I was relieved. I turned around to see where Karen was. Something hit the car with a loud thud, moving the rear end. I shouted, "What the hell was that?" I saw Karen in the moonlight, naked and covered in blood. She was walking over to the car. I yelled at her, "Karen, what is going on? Why are you covered in blood?" She just stood there looking at me. She looked at me without saying anything. Her eyes were dead. "You brought me back to my home." "They came for me. I can never leave. I can't go back." "They'll kill you." "What will kill me? What are you talking about?" They were huge, at least 7 or 8 feet tall. "Peter, leave now," she screamed. At least a dozen dark figures were around her. I drove fast down the mountain. What had just happened didn't seem real. I kept trying to process it on the way home. I wasn't sure what to say or how I was going to explain it. I simply couldn't tell anyone. I knew I would get blamed for it. As I drove home, I made a split decision. I had to run and stay on the run. I turned the car around and sped off. I've been running ever since. What happened in Eagle Cap haunts me. I don't go into the mountains anymore. Maybe someday I'll go back. Maybe not just yet. I was on a plane for a business trip. It was a regional airline, and I expected nothing. I was just hoping for a free soda and pretzels. The flight was supposed to be just a couple of hours. We boarded on time, which was surprising. I always think there will be a delay, but not this time. I found my seat. I sat in the window seat to lean against the wall and try to catch some sleep. The plane wasn't full, which was nice. I was celebrating the extra space. I did my usual routine: buckle up, nod off, and hope I wake up at landing. But I couldn't fall asleep. I had this uneasy feeling. I figured it was just nerves or maybe too much coffee. Before the flight, I watched movies, listened to music, and tried to sleep. Sleep didn't come. I noticed flight attendants moving around, but they weren't serving drinks or snacks. They kept walking up and down the aisle, looking at passengers and whispering to each other. It was weird. My watch said we'd been up for an hour, but we hadn't landed. I looked out the window and saw clouds, not city lights. I tried to get the attention of one of the flight attendants, but they avoided my gaze. Finally, I flagged one down. I asked, "How long until we land?" She smiled, but it didn't comfort me. "Not long," she said. "Just relax." Her response didn't help. I tried watching more movies, but I was still anxious. I got up to stretch and use the bathroom. I hoped a walk would help. I noticed everyone seemed calm. They were sitting, reading, or watching the screen. No one was talking or moving much. It was like they were sedated. I reached the bathroom, did my business, and washed my hands. I looked tired. In shaking my head, I tried to shake off the feeling. I checked the flight information screen when I stepped out. It was on, but it was just displaying the airline logo. I went back to my seat, trying to keep my breathing even. I was scared. I didn't want to freak out and cause a scene, but I was freaking out inside. I tried talking to the guy in the aisle seat, but he just smiled and nodded, then went back to his book. Time seemed to be passing slowly. Then I watched a 2-hour movie. When it finished, my watch showed 30 minutes had passed. I was freaking out. I got up and asked the flight attendant if we were lost. He said everything was fine. But how could I enjoy the flight when it felt like we were stuck in a time loop? I looked out the window again, hoping to see something that would tell me where we were or what was happening. But there was nothing but clouds stretching out to the horizon. And that's when the real fear set in. What if this flight never ends? What if we're stuck here forever? I tried to push those thoughts away, but as the hours ticked by with no sign of landing, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I'm on a plane that seems to be going on forever. I have no idea how to get off. I've been feeling like something's not right for a while. Time is weird. My watch and phone are useless. Seconds tick away slowly. It's too slow and too fast, messing with my head. I've tried talking to other passengers again. Most just give me a stare or that same smile the flight attendants have. It's like they're in some bizarre club I didn't get an invite to. There was this one guy, though, sitting a few rows ahead of me. He looked like he was feeling the same thing. I caught his eye and he quickly looked away, but I saw the panic. I saw someone else who might be sharing this nightmare, but I couldn't get a chance to talk to him. Every time I tried to get up, a flight attendant would suddenly be there asking me to return to my seat. I've started paying more attention to the flight itself. I'm trying to find out what's going on. The flight path on the screens isn't showing up. The pilot's updates have stopped. The cockpit has gone silent. When I look out, I expect to see something change, but I don't. The clouds are thick and unnatural. They don't move, and it's like we're flying above a white ocean. It's starting to feel claustrophobic. I've tried to break this cycle, but nothing helps. It loops back to the start. I only sleep 000 of T. I'm not aware of time, but even sleep feels weird. It's restless and filled with dreams of being trapped in this plane. I wake up disoriented, unsure of what's dream and what's reality. I thought about opening the emergency exit. I know it's crazy, but I was desperate to break free. Instead, I wandered to the back of the plane. I went to the galley to see what was going on. The flight crew was chatting and looking relaxed. It was strange seeing them so calm when everything else felt wrong. I cleared my throat to get their attention. I looked at them and saw that smile again. It was like they knew something I didn't. I asked for water. One of them handed me a cup. I took it. Our fingers brushed. Her smile faltered for a moment. I saw fear and sadness in her eyes. Before I could ask, the mask was back in place. I went back to my seat, feeling more isolated than ever. It's like I'm in a bubble, cut off from the rest of I can't help but wonder if I'm the only one trapped in this plane. What if everyone is like me, unable to connect? The idea terrifies me. It's hard to reach out to others who are going through the same thing. I'm trying to find someone who can understand. If you're reading this, please reply. If you've experienced anything like this, please let me know. I need to know I'm not alone. As I look out at the endless clouds, I feel like I'm stuck in a never-ending void. I'm starting to lose hope. I don't know how much time has passed since I last wrote something. Time is meaningless here. I've stopped tracking it. My phone and watch are just accessories. My last attempt to reach out to find someone who might be going through the same thing didn't work. I tried to reach out to find someone to share this endless flight. I sank into numbness. It's a survival mechanism. Something happened. I'm back in my stupor. The sharp, cold reality of my situation started with a change, a small one, but in the context of this never-ending flight, it was monumental. The clouds started to thin out after countless hours of staring at the same view. The dense blanket of clouds below us began to break apart, revealing glimpses of land and sea. It was the first change in the environment since this began. It gave me hope. With the change in scenery came a change in the passengers. It was subtle at first. People started looking around and whispering. Other passengers were moving around, but slowly and carefully. It was like we were waking up from a trance. I saw the man who had caught my eye before. He seemed to share my panic. He was standing in the aisle, looking around with wide eyes. Our gazes met, and we knew we weren't alone. We met and told each other our stories. We were both experiencing the same flight and distortions of time. We decided to confront the flight attendants. There was strength in numbers. We approached them. The confrontation was nothing like I expected. We started asking questions. The crew's smiles vanished as they realized we knew what was happening. They were just as trapped as we were. The pilot's door was locked, and we couldn't get in. The crew was not in control. We were all in this together, but we still didn't have the answers we wanted. We were a group of confused, scared individuals at the front of the plane. A crackle came over the speakers, and the pilot's voice broke the silence. It wasn't the reassurance or explanation we had hoped for. It was a simple, chilling message: prepare for landing. The announcement sparked a flurry of activity. The flight attendant did what they were trained to do. Seats were upright, trays were stowed, but the atmosphere was one of disbelief. Could this really be the end of our ordeal? The descent was slow and gentle. It was as if the plane was hesitant to rejoin the world below. Then, with a we touched down, the landing was surreal. We taxied to the gate, which felt anything but normal. When the seatbelt sign dinged, nobody moved. We were unsure of what we'd find when we disembarked. Would it be the same world we'd left? Had time passed? Alex was right beside me. We stepped into the aisle and moved towards the exit. The door opened, and we saw the airport. It looked normal. Stepping off the plane was like stepping into another reality. People were rushing by, unaware of what we had just experienced. I turned to Alex and we both understood that something had changed. We had shared something beyond understanding. I'm still looking for answers. The flight was on time, but we know it was more than that. We experienced something that defied time and space. That's my story of the endless flight.